Welcome to What the F Happened, Fraud and Financial Crime Deconstructed, a Defend podcast where we break down what's actually happening across fraud, scams, AML, and financial crime.
Each episode cuts through the noise to explain the tactics, trends, and real-world impact behind the headlines, so you're better prepared for what comes next. Let's get into it.
By 2027, $40 billion is going to just vanish from the U.S. economy.
Yeah, 40 billion. It's almost hard to wrap your head around a number like that.
It really is. I mean, and there are no ski masks, right? No getaway cars, no broken bank vaults. It's just generative AI quietly siphoning money out of the financial system at literal machine speed.
Right, and right now, well, the bad guys are winning the race.
They absolutely are. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are exploring the absolute front line of financial defense.
We're breaking down how Agentic AI is fundamentally rewiring the fraud and AML life cycles to, hopefully close that massive $40 billion gap.
Exactly. And to help you picture the sheer scale of what we're dealing with today, I want you to imagine modern financial networks as this sprawling, illuminated digital cityscape.
It's a great visual. Like every transaction is a pulse of light, right?
Yeah.
Millions per second, all interconnected and just constantly moving.
But before we can talk about the solution, the Agentic AI defense, we really have to understand the velocity of the problem spreading across that digital city.
Because criminals are, they're hyper-personalizing attacks now. They adapt their models instantly and automate their workflows at machine speed.
Right. While financial institutions, well, our sources describe them as being stuck at what they call meeting speed.
Meeting speed. Yeah, if you work in one of these organizations, you know exactly what that feels like.
Oh, 100%. It's the procurement cycles, the model risk committees, the endless IT ticketing queues. It feels like this high-speed chase where the criminals are driving sports cars on the Autobahn.
And the banks are trying to steer a massive cruise ship by committee.
Yes. Every single degree of turn requires like a vote, a memo, and a sign-off.
What's fascinating here is the underlying economics driving that Autobahn chase. The Interpol data in our sources points out that agentic AI fraud is 4.5 times more profitable than traditional fraud.
Wait, 4.5 times?
Yeah, and when attack economics improve by that magnitude, the threat landscape doesn't just scale linearly. You don't just see a higher volume of the usual attacks.
Right, you get totally new ones.
Exactly. You see entirely new, highly complex attack vectors that previously required way too much human labor to be financially viable.
Because the cost barrier to launch a sophisticated multi-layered attack drops effectively to zero.
Precisely. So the iteration loop for criminals becomes instantaneous. They launch a campaign, it fails, their AI tweaks the prompt based on the failure, and it relaunches in milliseconds.
Meanwhile, the targeted bank is scheduling a Q3 planning meeting just to discuss updating a single rule in their legacy system.
Which perfectly explains the alarming sentiment data from the sources. I mean, 89% of institutions say AI is supercharging scams. And 69% of fraud and AML leaders bluntly admit that criminals are currently better at leveraging AI than banks are at stopping it.
That is a staggering admission from the industry. But look, if the threat is burning down the front door and the criminals are making 4.5 times more money, institutions clearly have the incentive to buy better AI.
You'd think so, yeah.
So why aren't they stopping them? The July 2026 webinar calls this the execution gap. There is this massive breakdown between acquiring AI technology and actually catching bad guys with it.
The awareness is certainly there, though. I mean, 88% of organizations are using AI somewhere in their operations, and 62% are actively experimenting with AI agents.
But the drop-off in actual enterprise deployment is incredibly steep.
Yeah, 2/3 of these organizations haven't scaled it across the enterprise at all. Only 23% are scaling agents anywhere, and usually that deployment is restricted to less than 10% of a single functional area.
And the live poll they ran during the webinar really drives this home. The majority of attendees admitted they were stuck in Phase B, which is just piloting or testing.
Right. Only 39% reported any bottom line impact.
And usually that impact was under 5%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's unpack this, because from the outside looking in, this seems completely counterintuitive.
How so?
Well, we're constantly told how brilliant large language models and AI agents are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't a sophisticated AI just ingest whatever messy, unstructured data an institution has and organize it on the fly?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we hit a hard truth about artificial intelligence in enterprise environments. The models themselves are rarely the point of failure.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the execution gap exists because the underlying data isn't ready. Data readiness is this absolute, unglamorous, non-negotiable foundation that everyone just wants to skip over to get to the shiny new tool.
Wait, I have to push back on that a bit.
Eh,
You're saying the model isn't the problem. Because we've all seen LLMs hallucinate wildly or just confidently invent facts out of thin air.
Sure, yeah.
If I'm running a fraud department, my first fear is that the AI is going to hallucinate a massive money laundering ring that doesn't actually exist, freezing legitimate accounts in the process.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't I blame the model for that?
Look, it's a totally fair concern, but those hallucinations and false positives are actually exacerbated by what the sources called the multiplier effect of bad data.
The multiplier effect.
Right. Imagine a human analyst working with highly fragmented, siloed data systems. They might miss a crucial connection between two accounts and let a fraudulent transaction slip through.
Okay, so it's one bad call.
Exactly. But if an AI agent is unleashed on those same disjointed data fragments, it processes them at machine speed. It doesn't make one mistake. It makes 1,000 confident errors at scale in the blink of an eye.
Confident errors at scale.
Uh-huh.
It's a terrifying phrase.
Isn't it?
So if you feed an AI agent garbage, it doesn't just spit out garbage. It builds a highly efficient, automated garbage distribution factory.
That is the exact dynamic. In fact, Gartner predicted that 60% of AI projects will be abandoned through 2026 simply because organizations lack AI-ready data.
And in the financial sector specifically, the data landscape is notoriously messy. I mean, 41% of institutions are still running their fraud and AML operations in total silos.
Right. The fraud team has their database, the AML team has theirs, and they basically never talk to each other.
So if we go back to our visual metaphor, instead of a cohesive digital cityscape, imagine trying to read a star chart to navigate a ship, but you only have access to a third of the stars.
You're never going to see the constellation.
Exactly. The webinar notes that because of this lack of a unified data view, only 16% of institutions are able to catch synthetic identities within 24 hours. The real value doesn't unlock when you buy a new model.
No, it unlocks when you redesign the operating model, so the AI actually has a unified data layer to parse.
Right. And once that unified data foundation is in place, the shift in capability is radical. The sources walk through a real-world scenario dealing with a sudden spike in synthetic ID applications, just to demonstrate how this execution gap is finally bridged in practice.
Yeah, synthetic IDs are a perfect example. Fabricated identities that blend real and fictitious data. They pass initial onboarding but show coordinated behavior later.
We all know the traditional response path for a synthetic ID attack. The fraud team spots the anomaly. They define the business logic needed to catch it. They submit an IT engineering ticket.
And then they sit in the queue.
Right, waiting for feature engineering, rule creation, manual authoring, and backtesting. The whole process takes days, or, let's be honest, more likely weeks.
Meanwhile, the criminals are draining accounts. That is the cruise ship slowly turning degree by degree.
Exactly.
But the agentic AI path outlined in the webinar condenses that multi-week timeline into mere minutes, all happening in a single session.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You don't need a team of developers writing SQL queries. You essentially have a genius assistant sitting on your desktop.
Right.
You describe the threat in plain English, and it instantly checks your inventory, writes the logic, builds a trap, and tests it against historical data before your coffee even gets cold.
It's wild.
I actually like to think of it like hiring a master carpenter. You don't have to explain how to hold a hammer or calculate the angle to cut the wood. You just say, I need a chair that holds 300 pounds. And they immediately start pulling the right materials and assembling it based on your intent.
That's a great analogy. Let's look at the mechanics of how that carpenter operates, because the sources detail a very specific 5-step agentic workflow that completely redefines the analyst's day.
Okay, let's go through it.
Step 1 is simply plain language intent.
Right, so the analyst just opens a chat interface and types, detect new account applications with mismatched bureau data, thin credit history, and IP overlap. No code required.
Which instantly triggers step 2, gap analysis. In milliseconds, the agent scans the institution's entire unified data layer and its existing rule repository.
And it replies something like, I found 32 existing signals and 18 features we can use.
Yes, but here's the critical part. It flags what is missing. It tells the analyst, we have no current coverage built for IP overlap.
Finding those gaps before the build phase is massive. In the legacy process, you would spend 2 weeks building a role, push it to the testing environment, watch it fail, and only then realize the IP data wasn't mapped correctly.
Exactly. The agentic workflow identifies the blind spot at second number one. It saves weeks of rework.
So the agent suggests a fix, moving directly to step 3, which is feature authoring.
Right. The AI actually generates the new feature inline.
Yep.
In this case, it writes the underlying logic for a 30-day look back on device fingerprint velocity to cover that IP overlap gap.
But it doesn't just deploy it in the dark, right? It presents this generated logic to the human analyst for confirmation.
Exactly. And once the analyst signs off, we hit step 4, rule assembly. The AI pulls the existing signals and the newly authored feature together.
And what's crucial here, and the webinar emphasizes this heavily, is that the logic is fully visible.
Right. No black boxes.
Exactly. We aren't dealing with a black box neural network that just spits out a trust me score.
No.
The analyst sees the exact parameters.
So the AI might propose a threshold, like if these 4 conditions are met, add a risk score of 40.
And the analyst can immediately reply in the chat, actually tighten the IP overlap threshold from 3 down to 2.
The AI adjusts the code instantly based on that feedback, which leads to the final hurdle, step 5, pre-production testing.
Right, before a single piece of logic touches live customer data.
Exactly. The agent runs an instantaneous backtest against historical data. It outputs the results saying, deploying this rule will trigger 11,120 applications with an estimated 6% false positive rate.
So the analyst gets immediate empirical feedback. If a 6% false positive rate is too disruptive to the customer experience, they ask the AI to tune the logic again.
It's just seamless. A cross-departmental operation that used to require analysts, data scientists, and IT engineers passing tickets back and forth for a month is now...
It's a fluid 2-minute conversation between one analyst and their agent.
It is an incredible leap in productivity, but this raises an important question.
Yeah.
If an analyst can spin up a new rule and apply it to thousands of accounts in 2 minutes, the potential blast radius for a mistake is enormous.
Oh, gosh, well.
How do organizations prevent the AI from going rogue or an analyst from accidentally freezing half their legitimate customer base with a poorly phrased prompt?
I was wondering when we would get to the catch. If I am a compliance officer at a major bank, the idea of a frontline analyst bypassing IT and writing enterprise-wide rules via a chatbot gives me severe heart palpitations.
And the sources directly address that exact fear. Speed is entirely useless in a highly regulated environment if it isn't trustworthy.
Right.
One of the core philosophies stated in the webinar is that governance is the product. Governance isn't some feature they bolted on later to appease regulators. It is the fundamental architecture of the platform itself.
And they break this down into 5 non-negotiable pillars. Let's debate these pillars because I want to know how much friction they actually introduce into this supposedly lightning-fast system.
Okay, let's do it.
Pillar 1 is role-based access control, or RBAC. They strictly separate who can use the AI from who can manage the AI system itself.
Right. The person hunting the fraud on the front lines cannot be the same person altering the core parameters of the agent.
Makes sense. Pillar 2 is full traceability, meaning every single prompt typed by the analyst, every line of code generated by the agent, and every backtest result is permanently logged.
So when the regulators inevitably arrive for an audit, the institution has a pristine, immutable trail of exactly how and why a decision was made.
Right. Then Pillar 3 is lifecycle stages. AI-generated entities require explicit, structured review phases before moving into production.
And Pillar 4 is human approval. Every action is confirmed by a person, and any change can be rolled back instantly.
But wait, hold on. I need to stop you here.
Yeah.
If we require human approval, manual reviews, and strict lifecycle stages for every single action, doesn't that completely defeat the purpose of machine speed defense? We are basically putting the cruise ship committee back in charge of the sports car.
That is the exact paradox institutions are wrestling with today. Speed versus control.
Exactly.
But here is how the agentic model resolves that friction during actual investigations. When an alert fires, the AI mimics human review to do all the heavy lifting.
Okay.
It instantly gathers context from across that unified data layer we talked about earlier. It reads the disparate signals and outputs a plain English summary for the analyst.
Like what?
For example, it might say, I see a cluster of 4 linked accounts that pass standard onboarding, but they all share a single high-velocity device fingerprint.
Okay.
And then it will actually suggest a disposition, pointing the analyst toward the reject button.
So it is compressing hours of manual data gathering and cross-referencing into a 5-second summary. But it never actually pulls the trigger itself.
Never. The AI acts as the ultimate researcher and synthesizer, but the human analyst reads the rationale and physically clicks the button to make the final decision.
The human is securely steering the ship at all times.
Exactly. And speaking to the final pillar, data isolation. All of this happens securely within the institution's walls. Proprietary data is never sent outward to train public large language models.
So you aren't accidentally teaching the internet your proprietary fraud detection secrets.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive staring down a $40 billion threat from generative AI fraud.
With criminals weaponizing AI to launch hyper-personalized, relentlessly adaptable attacks.
Right. But the financial institutions that are surviving this onslaught aren't just buying random AI tools, they are fundamentally closing the execution gap.
They're breaking down their data silos to eliminate those confident errors at scale.
And they're deploying agentic workflows that allow a single human analyst to write, test, and deploy fully governed controls in minutes rather than weeks.
It shifts the entire posture of an organization. Teams reclaim thousands of hours previously burned on manual ticketing and data gathering, allowing them to finally transition from exhausting reactive firefighting into proactive defense.
It really is the only mathematical way to keep pace with an adversary who has zero marginal cost for their attacks.
It is an incredible equalizer.
It is. But it leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over as we wrap up today.
Okay.
The agentic system we just explored is beautifully designed to keep a human securely in the loop. It mandates human sign-off at every single step to satisfy governance and trust.
Right.
But if agentic fraud is 4.5 times more profitable and the sheer volume of these attacks scales to heights we have literally never seen, what happens when the human analyst, even armed with brilliant 5-second AI summaries, becomes the ultimate bottleneck?
Wow. Simply because they cannot physically click approve or reject fast enough.
Exactly. Will the human-in-the-loop model eventually be forced to evolve into pure machine-to-machine combat just to survive the speed of the Automon chase?
That's a lot to process.
It is. Something to really think about as you evaluate your own organization's AI roadmap. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to What the F Happened? Fraud and Financial Crime Deconstructed, a Defend podcast by DataVisor. If you want to keep learning between episodes, check out Defend Training, a set of self-paced online courses for fraud and financial crime professionals, practical and built around real-world scenarios.
And you can earn CPE credits through the ACFE San Francisco Bay Area chapter. You can find it at datavisor.com/defendtraining. The link's in the description.